Assignment. It seems that secret deals and strange alliances, spiked with just the right amount of intrigue, have long been associated with the daily routine of our nation's capital. Part of that intrigue is the gathering of sensitive or highly classified information about the United States that the United States doesn't want to share with certain foreign governments. This weekend, our show is devoted to exploring how the KGB, for example, Russia's highly efficient spy network, functions as fact finder for the Soviet Union. One of their first missions is to recruit agents that could be friendly to their cause. Our correspondent Joe Trento, a veteran journalist who's no stranger to reporting on counterintelligence matters, was told by American authorities that he was recently targeted by the KGB as a potential source for spreading their propaganda to the American public. And it all happened over a lunch with Vladimir.
Have you been to a baseball game?
Yeah. Yeah, in Philadelphia. I've never been to visit. 6 hours.
Yeah, long.
Eating hot dogs, drinking beer.
What you're looking at is a videotape taken with hidden cameras of a Soviet named Vladimir Brusnitsin. Brusnitsin's cover job is as the Deputy Soviet Information Officer here in Washington. But intelligence experts tell us Brusnitsin is a Soviet KGB agent. They say that the meeting you are seeing is the first step in his attempt to recruit me to work for the Soviet cause. To me, it seemed like an uneventful conversation on a pleasant spring day in Georgetown. Brusnitsin talked about his days as a University of California exchange student at Berkeley.
And when I came to this city and saw that it's quite, very quiet campus.
Nothing like you expected, huh?
Violence, without any riots.
We're all fellas. We're all friends. We're all friends. We're just fellas. They're nice guys. And he's wearing, obviously, not a Joseph A. Banks, but he's wearing a Henry Dash's blazer and slacks and a proper shirt. Likes Miller Lite. Just a fellow, just like you and I. But he's a trained Soviet intelligence officer.
Dr. William Corson should know. He spent most of his life fighting the Soviet KGB around the world as a Marine officer assigned to the CIA. Now he and Robert Crowley, a longtime CIA official, whose face we cannot show, have written a new book, The New KGB, Engine of Soviet Power. The work is based on their combined 70 years' experience of battling the Committee for State Security. They alerted me prior to my meeting with Brusnitsin, outlining the approach he would take. They said after opening with small talk, the KGB officer would get my views on more serious issues. They turned out to be right. We talked about the shooting of U.S. Major Arthur Nicholson in East Germany last month.
This person, Major, was shot, and the sentry couldn't allow the subject.
Is he free of total authority, or did he come to this meeting with a game plan?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the Soviets, particularly a Soviet intelligence officer in the United States, does nothing based on spontaneity. That whatever he does is an approved activity and perhaps a directed activity. And I think you can state with surety that there is nothing casual about his effort to meet with you for this lunch.
They've read everything you've written, and they know you've moved into a new house. They know more about you right now than the person that's holding your mortgage, because you're a potential agent of influence.
Our contact with Brusnitsin started when we called the Soviet embassy for comment on the Corson and Crowley book about the KGB. He refused comment, but after a brief get-acquainted meeting, we made inquiries as to who this Soviet was. FBI counterintelligence sources said he was a top-flight KGB agent. Our next meeting was to be a luncheon, but in true spy fashion, we arranged to secretly videotape his visit to our Special Assignment office. In the Special Assignment's conference room, Brusnitsin is examining historic photographs of the KGB he has never seen. The pictures, many never published before, appear in the soon-to-be-published book. They include this picture of Felix Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the Soviet KGB. And this is a picture of Lavrentiy Beria, a KGB boss who ordered millions executed.
Oh, this looks good. Let's grab this one.
We then headed up the street for lunch.
These gents have a great many lunches in the course of their life.
So this is very typical work for a KGB.
It is. It's absolutely consistent with the modalities of this kind of approach.
We asked Corson why the KGB would be interested in me.
You're also a representative of a very conservative news organization, and that's more important. The alphabet soup networks, they don't have to worry about those people. They're on their side. And that's not saying that they're pro-communists. They're détentistes, and they take leave of their critical faculties. This is a Soviet operation designed to find out if they can establish an agent in place. It doesn't mean that you will know that you're working for the KGB. Somebody's going to help you.
Corson and Crowley believe that because I've reported on scientific intelligence in the past, the KGB officers believe I might be a source for information on the Star Wars program. We learned the KGB officer was trained in physics. During lunch, he asked me about Reagan's Strategic Defense Proposal, SDI, also known as Star Wars.
What do you think about this SDI?
As we listen to the audio of your luncheon conversation, the Soviets are concerned about the Strategic Defense Initiative, a.k.a. Star Wars. They don't know whether that's real or what in the world it is, but they're serious about it. And their concern is manifested where will activity about SDI take place that's important to the Soviet Union. Much of it will take place right in the Washington area with the research organizations and the think tanks and so forth.
Well, I think the purpose of the preliminary lunch really is to get to know you and to try and establish what your prospective or potential access is to sources of information of interest to them. Also to try and divine, if you can, what your personal aspirations and ambitions are, and also to determine whether there might be some way of assisting you by providing you with certain materials, which materials would be helpful in support of Soviet policy.
Brushnitsin offered to help me get a copy of a television series about the adventures of the Soviet KGB that ran on Russian television last summer.
The feeling of the Soviet people to this organization and the feeling of the American to the FBI is quite different.
You think so?
According to Corson and Crowley, Brushnitsin will prepare a report and send it to KGB headquarters in Moscow, known as the Moscow Center.
You can make book that he and Stanislav Andrusov, the resident, got together, and they looked at it because they're making recommendations and they're seeking additional advice from the center. So at the next meeting, the next lunch, dinner, whatever you want to call it, there will be a more precise agenda.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again.
Very well, thank you.
Of course, we don't know if there'll be another meeting with Brushnitsin, especially after this program runs. When we return, Bill Corson will take us on a tour of the buildings where the KGB operates in Washington.
Well, this dates back to the Roosevelt administration. They took up...
Our tour of the KGB's Washington real estate starts at the Soviet Embassy on 16th Street. It's just a few blocks from the White House. Dr. William Corson, who's had first-hand experience in U.S. intelligence fighting the KGB, is our guide.
But this is a hub. This is the corporate headquarters of the KGB.
Corson estimates that there are 250 KGB agents operating under diplomatic cover in Washington.
They have a safety net in the form of their diplomatic immunity. If they're caught, send them on home.
And he says many of them are top professionals.
You will be impressed not only that they speak good English, which is an American category for being a good guy, but they speak colloquial English.
This man, Anatoly Dobrinin, has been the Soviet ambassador to Washington for more than 20 years. But according to Corson, Stanislav Andrusov is the real boss in the embassy. He's the head of the Soviet KGB in Washington.
The KGB resident, literally, he tells the ambassador what he's going to do. And the ambassador obviously is doing foreign policy, but the serious business is under the control and the direction of the KGB.
And the KGB has other real estate in Washington. The Lothrop Mansion, worth tens of millions, is located 2 blocks from the place where Ronald Reagan was shot in 1981.
Officially, it is the residence of the trade representation of the USSR. And trade has been this elusive goal with the Soviet Union for years, and it's a snare and a delusion, because there isn't any trade. There's really, it's government-to-government sales, and trade is merely a cover for Soviet espionage activities, has been for more than 60 years. This is a major communication intercept operation. It's designed, and you can't see, but there are devices that are located in the attic and on the 3rd floor of this building as well that are designed to intercept telephone calls on C&P telephones. They can intercept 80% of the numbers, the 1 million numbers in Washington, D.C. And they are a very busy group of young men.
But the crown jewel of KGB operations in Washington is the Tunlaw Road facility, located on Mount Alto, Washington's highest point.
With the new Soviet embassy there next to the Tunlaw facility, will enable the Soviets to effectively monitor every government facility, to include the command bunker at Khatotkin up in Maryland, the CIA at Blaine, the NSA at Fort Meade, in fact, the entire element.
Like the Soviets, the United States is building a new embassy, but our site in Moscow does not allow us to monitor the city electronically, according to Corson.
In a facetious way, you would be lucky to be able to get Radio Moscow on your radio in the new embassy, because it's in a cavern, in a cement and steel cavern.
1500 Massachusetts Avenue is a private apartment complex in Washington. According to Dr. Corson, some of the Soviets with more sinister assignments live here.
Today, there are 9 Soviet agents living in this apartment. Now, what do they do? I don't like to coin a corny metaphor, but they come out at night. And these people, they don't live in Tunlaw and they don't live in any other facilities because they have a very discrete and distinct function.
What's that function?
Their function is to troll the gay bars in search of young American servicemen with access to sensitive classified information.
As we taped at 1500 Massachusetts Avenue, a little drama unfolded before our cameras. This Soviet parked illegally next to the apartment building. After he saw our camera, he and his companion left hurriedly. In the process, they dropped a document, which Bill Corson picked up. The document was a training application for an American Secret Service agent. It contained the names of several Secret Service officials and job titles the U.S. government usually keeps secret.
That document, as we have now learned, is in the hands of the FBI. And they tell us they're trying to determine if the KGB and its operatives have actually penetrated the files of the Secret Service. When we come back, William Corson will tell us how unsuspecting government workers can often fall into the hands of trained Soviet spies.
Our luncheon companion, Vladimir Brusnitsyn, first came to the United States under the cover of an exchange student, studying physics at the University of California. Now intelligence experts say with the advent of Star Wars, he's become a top KGB agent in Washington. According to Corson and as co-author of the new KGB, former CIA executive Robert Crowley, such students are common here.
So these are an 18-year-old college freshman?
No. And they have been made participants in exchange programs simply because they do indeed have the academic credentials, and it's not possible for them to participate without approval of the KGB. There is no travel, there is no permit to travel abroad without the KGB.
You can't stop them from spying, and that's part of the game. But we put ourselves at a disadvantage. There's no comparability. We have a few people in the Soviet Union, and there are literally legions of Russians designed to loot this country of its secrets. And it's just an unfair fight.
Spies like Vladimir Brusnitsin are well known to the FBI. Brusnitsin is referred to in the trade as a legal, a spy working under diplomatic or trade cover. According to the FBI, the real damage is done by illegals, KGB agents who can be any nationality that live in the United States undercover. KGB agents like Brusnitsin never contact a hidden illegal agent. Sometimes the KGB will comb through American archives and use old birth and death certificates in order to have a basis to create a false history or legend for an illegal agent.
The new assignees come into the Soviet embassy or wherever, and one of the first things they do is to enroll at the National Archives in the genealogy course. Now, the genealogy course teaches you what schoolhouses burned down and so forth and so on, and it teaches you how to create a legend of an American.
Once in place, the job of illegals is to prey upon U.S. citizens who have access to secret information. Former FBI counterintelligence expert Larry McWilliams used the example of California's Silicon Valley. The heart of America's computer chip industry is located here.
The KGB center, the headquarters, they'll sit around and say, look, let's use Silicon Valley as an example out in California. This is building up. We have to get into that area. They make the decision to send an illegal over there to start building a net up.
Illegals also look for potential talent for the KGB.
But what illegals will very often do is that they're mixing in with the American public, as whatever the cover they have. They can serve greatly as spotters. In other words, they're in a bar or they're in a place where all of a sudden a couple of engineers from Silicon Valley are talking about something that they're working on. One of them gets as drunk as a billy goat. The illegal may decide that this is not the thing that he could handle, but somebody else can who's working out of the regular establishment from the consulate.
Just how an illegal agent notifies Moscow used to be a difficult and cumbersome problem. Not anymore. These North American Defense Command personnel are tracking a Soviet spy satellite. Technology has taken a giant leap from the days of the mail drop and shortwave radio in a secret attic compartment. McWilliams explains that today's KGB illegal can communicate with Moscow Center with little fear of being found out.
They are small electronic pieces of equipment that can be secreted in the suitcase and the bureau drawer. They can be anywhere in the nation in possession of a Soviet illegal. And he gathers information from the agents that he has developed or has been transferred to him. Now, he puts this into a certain type of code. He sets this up on a tape. He puts this into the machine. Now, he has a schedule of satellites coming over, the Soviet satellites coming over the United States. The scientists in Moscow have told him at exactly 12:03, right directly above your town will be such and such a satellite. It's all you do is at 12:03, push the button. And at 12:03, he pushes the button, and it's about the length of a 3 or 4 page document. That sound I just made. And that's transmitted in code immediately up to the satellite. The satellite carries it back over the Soviet Union, prearranged, dumps it right down into KGB or GRU headquarters.
And McWilliams says there's another kind of danger to the United States.
When I first started into the business, a tremendous amount of it was ideological. The Rosenbergs, the Remingtons, and things of that.
They did it because
they did it because of ideology. But in recent years, forget the ideology. In fact, I remember a Soviet whom we managed to turn, became a defector on our side. He told me one time of speaking with one of the chiefs of intelligence in the Soviet Union. And he says, forget about ideology. This was his instruction. When you get to America, forget about ideology. Buy their souls. They'll sell it.
Christopher Boyce, son of an FBI agent, former seminary student, sold out his country for money. His story was chronicled in the recent film, The Falcon and the Snowman. Not since Julius and Ethel Rosenberg gave the secrets of the atomic bomb to Russia has so much damage been done. Hired as a low-level clerk in a spy satellite communications facility, Boyce sold the Russians secrets that would allow them to thwart our most sophisticated spy satellites.
And get out of here.
By the time Boyce was caught, he'd already compromised $3 billion in U.S. research by turning it over to the KGB.
The information we have in our free society, they must have, or the Soviet system will collapse, totally collapse.
Why?
Because they lack the spread of technological capability. They can put a missile in the sky and do a lot of other things, but they can't do as well in your business. When they were watching the tapes, when Yuri Andropov watched the tapes of the KAL shootdown, he did it on a Sony VCR, not one made in Russia.
Horst says that the Soviet Union has never changed its goals.
So if you say they're just fellas and we're going to have detente by another name, you're kidding yourself. You're deluding yourself, and we've deluded ourselves for a long number of years. And one of the reasons we wrote this book. If you don't want to believe it, that's your problem, not mine, and it's not Bob Crowley's problem. But you can no longer say you haven't been told.
Joe Trento, CNN on special assignment.
That's our show for this weekend. If you have any comments or suggestions for a story you would like us to look into, write us in care of Special Assignment, 2133 Wisconsin Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20007. From Atlanta, I'm Larry Woods, and this has been Special Assignment.
Nefertiti, Queen of the Ancient World, holds court at the Egyptian Museum. Discover Berlin. You'll like what you find. This is AFN TV. The following is a Berlin PM special report.
Good evening. I'm Air Force Sergeant Bob Lance. Tonight we have as guests in our studio Lieutenant Colonel John Conmead, the commander of the Air Force Office of Special Investigation, Detachment 7028 in Berlin, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Harrington, commander of the 766th Military Intelligence Detachment. They're here to talk to us about the film we've just seen. Gentlemen, welcome to AFN. Our first question this evening, what do you think of the film that we've just seen?
I thought it was an excellent depiction of exactly what the capabilities of the Soviets are operating in the United States in Washington, D.C. I think it brought home in a very real and graphic way the threat posed not only to U.S. servicemen and women, but also to citizens and any of those people that might be in possession of information that the Soviets feel will be valuable to their cause. And it shows how an innocuous beginning can sometime lead up to a nefarious end. And the informal manner and the way it was portrayed on camera, I thought was excellent and very real.
Colonel Harrington?
I think I can only echo what Colonel Conmead said, and also commend AFN TV for showing this extremely valuable depiction of the Soviet intelligence effort, and add that here in West Berlin, what you saw on the screen there, I could only say would be underscored, and with an exclamation point behind it here in West Berlin, because in fact, the Soviets' capabilities in exploiting human beings to gather intelligence, which we saw a sample of, and a very, I think, interesting sample of in this particular little piece of tape, is more than ever practiced here in West Berlin. Very, very realistic, I thought, and showed us something that's very important to remember, namely that what you saw was an apparently innocent, innocuous luncheon by a friendly journalist, which in fact, of course, was not innocent or innocuous at all. So I give it a, high grades.
Colonel Harrington, second question, how would you describe the approach that may be made to a service member or a family member here in Berlin if it were for the purpose of exploitation? Would it be similar to the approach that was used in the film, or would it be
even more blatant, more out in the open?
Well, I think to answer that, I'd have to say that, first of all, the least likely thing that a soldier or one of his dependents or a local wage rate or an American civilian employee in Berlin might experience is sitting outside at a table across from someone named Dmitri or Ivan, in which he begins to cultivate them in the way that we saw in the film. There are as many variations of approaches used by the various hostile intelligence agencies that work against our command here in Berlin as there are people. Again, though, we can expect, for example, to find people cultivating friendships who are co-workers or who are someone that they've simply met socially. We can find Soviet or East European nationals who, through the course of their duties here in West Berlin, have contact with Americans who will begin to expend effort to establish friendships and off-duty relationships. What the people in the command, I think, need to know is that they should be most cautious, above all, in West Berlin, and not accept things at face value, because the number of approaches and the variations, both on this side of the wall in West Berlin and in East Berlin, are numerous, and so everyone needs to be very circumspect in and alert in their relations.
Colonel Conmee, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, perhaps I can give you a specific example of an incident that happened earlier this year. There was the wife of a service member in East Berlin and happened to be in a store where she was approached by a male individual, and he asked her to carry this package across back to West Berlin for him. The package, he said, was some, innocuous China, but he was afraid that since he was there on a tourist visa, even though he was a West German, he would not be allowed to take that back across the checkpoint. Well, of course, the spouse of this service member handled the situation very, very well, and simply declined in a polite manner, telling the individual that that was something that she could not do. And the individual left her alone, and then came back and made another overture in which she again politely declined. Now, this could have been a, shall we say, a legitimate request, or it could have been a provocation on the part of either the Soviets or the East Germans to put one of our people in an embarrassing situation, and also by preying on their usual nature to try and be helpful to people as opposed to just politely declining. Of course, this is the thing that one has to bear uppermost in mind, that the most innocuous request for assistance could be designed to trap you down the road into doing something illegal or wrong or against, regulations.
What could one do to help defend against any of the threats posed by hostile intelligence agencies that are working against the United States?
Well, let me speak from the Air Force perspective, and I'm sure Colonel Harrington will handle the Army perspective later. The regulations we have are different names and different numbers, but they're very similar. In the Air Force, it's called Air Force Regulation 20557, and it requires all Air Force members to report immediately to OSI any type of situation, suspicion, or circumstance where they believe that they have been approached or targeted by a human hostile intelligence resource. It also requires members of the Air Force to report or gain permission and approval before they visit any hostile establishment, that is, any establishment of a communist-controlled country. And these items or this regulation is basically protective in nature, in the sense that it is designed solely for the protection of both the Air Force member and the national security. If people follow this and do report to us any type of incidents where they feel that there's something wrong about them or just not right, then we will take it up from there and are able to defend against what may be a definite hostile approach to them. The thing to really bear uppermost in mind is that this regulation only requires people to report. It does not say anything about the legitimacy or the ability to continue those relations. It does not prohibit these contacts from being made in these relations. That's a command prerogative and is handled, by command. But the second thing to remember in this is that simply because you've been approached, there is nothing that's going to happen to you in an untoward way. You are basically, a victim, so you don't have to be worried about losing, your clearance or your job. There is no onus placed on you as an individual at all. And the requirement to report, and let us handle from there. Also, don't try and judge, shall we say, the appropriateness of the contact and saying, oh, that was very innocent, that was very innocuous. We need to be informed of all of them. And the more we are informed of them, the better that the Air Force, the national security, and certainly the community in Berlin here are protected.
Colonel Harrington, the Army side of the question?
I think it's important for our people here in West Berlin to realize that the Soviets and their East Bloc allies target our command aggressively, and that not only, of course, are they interested in people who they might be able to recruit to do, essentially to commit treason, but the approach that is taken. I think it's important to remember that few Americans who've ever gotten themselves involved in espionage in the past several decades have gotten involved because of any love of communism. In fact, what we see is people who have weaknesses, be it monetary problems, be it marital problems, be it lifestyle problems. People with weaknesses and vulnerabilities are the ones whom hostile intelligence has made a very successful trade out of converting into lucrative sources who can provide millions of dollars worth of information for what's a pittance insofar as the pay that they might receive. And that therefore, here in West Berlin, we need to be, if we want to defend ourselves, first of all, very discreet and moderate in our lifestyle. Stay straight, because behavior here of that sort that I've described can come to the attention, and does, of hostile intelligence, who incidentally monitor our telephones, looking for people with these sorts of problems. Secondly, I think it's necessary to be security conscious here in the city, extra cautious, remembering that the hostile intelligence effort is interested not only in gaining classified information, for example, over the telephone or for someone in a bar, but equally interested in finding out who the people are who have the weaknesses. We need to, therefore, don't discuss things about personal weaknesses over the phone or in public. We need, of course, not to talk shop. We need to use the secure telephone whenever and wherever we can. And, of course, educate our co-workers and our families. Our regulation that Army personnel must abide by, the equivalent of what Colonel Conmee has described, is Army Regulation 381-12, Subversion and Espionage Directed Against the Army. This regulation requires that soldiers, their dependents, and other Department of the Army employees report to the 766th Military Intelligence Detachment any one of a long laundry list of incidents. Generally speaking, of course, if someone is approached by a Soviet, an East German, or another East Bloc person, that's an obviously reportable thing. Less obvious, though, and more important, are those things around which there's some ambiguity. Attempts by unauthorized persons, for example, to get overly curious about one's duties, people trying to establish friendships with you who are outside of the normal command here, whether it be in West Berlin or in East Berlin, and I might add it's more likely to happen in West Berlin than in East Berlin. It's important for people to be alert and know that they must report any attempts to gain information, whether it be classified or unclassified information. And that could be through either observation, taking photographs, use of a Xerox machine during off-duty hours. Any behavior like that is reportable.
Even something as simple as requesting a copy of the brigade phone book.
Things which are unclassified, such as the telephone book or other unclassified documents, are important because one of the things we know, of course, that hostile intelligence will do is to start out in a very innocuous way to get someone to perform a service which doesn't involve at all taking a document with a secret cover sheet. So our people need to be exceptionally alert, and they need to know that Army Regulation 381-12 requires them to report these things, and that, should they fail to report, that the regulation has a punitive clause. This isn't a threat on my part or on MI's part to put people in jeopardy, but everyone needs to know that this is extremely serious, above all in West Berlin, and that when they either hear, see, or suspect something that is suspicious, they must report it under AR 381-12, and they must report it to the 766 MID for Army people. And the best way to do that, by the way, is to come to Clay Compound, to Building 3, to the 766 headquarters, and do this in person. If the person wants to telephone, they can call us at 819-6166, but I would urge them, keeping in mind that the telephones in West Berlin are notoriously insecure, that if they call, that they merely set up an appointment to talk with a special agent about an important matter.
Okay. You led right into the last question that we have for you this evening.
If I could just amplify for a moment on something you said, Stu, that perhaps the best advice we could give the service members and their families out there is not to be a rule breaker. And there are many regulations that are set up under the USCOMP here that are designed solely to protect us, such as, crossing a checkpoint, Charlie, etc. Chances are, if you do break these rules and try and do something untoward, like, for example, using a different checkpoint or whatnot, we will, find out about that, and that's where difficulties ensue for people.
Okay, getting to our last question. Some of our viewers who have watched both the KGB report from CNN and have seen our discussion may now realize that they have had a contact that they didn't anticipate or even think was a contact. Who should they contact for the OSI, for instance?
Well, for Air Force personnel, there's really no problem. We understand how these things occur and can happen, and what might not seem very significant to you before, in retrospect, will. So they can simply call the Air Force Office of Special Investigations at Tempelhof, and our number is 5108, and make an appointment to see any agent. We request, of course, that the contact or whatever they have to say, they come in person. It's a lot better to handle it that way, and as Stu said about the phones is absolutely true. So there is no reason to have any fear, even if it happened many years ago. If it's something that they feel that we should know about, anything that falls into that general category that we've discussed here this evening, they should just call and make an appointment.
Okay, Colonel Harrington, could we have the numbers again for the 766 MI?
They can call us at 819-6166, and I'd like to put a punctuation mark behind what John said. There may be viewers out there who, having heard what we've said this morning and having seen this excellent film, may suddenly realize that while they haven't been approached by someone named Dmitri, that they have in fact been contacted by telephone or by mail, or have suddenly found themselves in a relationship which was disguised as a business relationship or a social relationship, and they realize now, having heard what we've said, that they should have reported it. And I would urge them, as Colonel Conmee did, to don't feel badly about this. It happens all the time. But to don't think because it happened weeks or even months ago that this is something that's finished, because our experience shows that these things die a very slow death. So I would urge the person or persons amongst the viewers who may have had that happen, feel free to come in. As Colonel Conmee said, you're not in any trouble at all, but to protect yourself and the command, it's very important to take this most seriously, and we stand ready to serve.
Thank you very much. Our guests this evening have been Lieutenant Colonel John Conmee from the Air Force Office of Special Investigation and Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Harrington, commander of the 766 Military Intelligence Detachment. I'm Air Force Sergeant Bob Lance. Have a good evening.
This has been a Berlin PM special report.